the subject of today's lecture concerns of generating dialogues in the open meetings. And just to start to have a bit of repeating some of the context of open talks. And in this idea of generating dialogues in the open meeting, there is some prerequisites that seems to be important to take into account. And in the last lecture, in the end, we came into showing the guidelines of open dialogue, which in my mind gives a good frame for optimal way of focusing on dialogues in the meeting. So having an optimal dialogues in the meeting in which families and many professionals are present, there are some good things to take into account. Of course, these meetings can be organized in whatsoever context and in whatsoever practice. A therapist can put some of these ideas in his consultation or her consultation with the families, with clients. But concerning crisis intervention services and a larger collaboration with professionals, so these ideas are very good. So having immediate response in a crisis gives the possibility to start in a crisis situation, and that's important for generating dialogue, because in a crisis there always are loaded emotional experiences which actually are quite good support for dialogues, starting with for dialogues. And the second point was to always in this situation to start with the larger context, including the family and some other relevant members of the private social network and of the professional network. So in this sense, what happens is that in a crisis situation with those emotional loadings, people come together without any responses how to go on, but only big answers. What is this problem all about and what should we do? And again, all these needs people's possibility to be involved in a dialogical conversation. Being flexible means that our meetings are guided by the idea that we don't have any program that we apply, but always try to find the best way to go on with that fits best for the client and for the family in this special situation, which also is going to be changed in 1 day or some days or some weeks. Responsibility and psychological continuity refer to the idea that professionals are available for the clients all the time from the very beginning. The clients can be sure that wherever they are contacted, they are always taken into account and they are not referred to another authorities, but these people are meeting with them. Again, very enhancing experience for the clients to be part of an open dialogue in which they have a sense of security as we are taking seriously, and that's the basic for of course to be involved in dialogues. Psychological continuity referring the idea that people can work, professionals can work together across the boundaries of different treatment systems. And then the last points, and that's of course the subject very much today, to focus that in this process we focus on generating a safe enough forum for our joint experiences in the way that we can tolerate the uncertainty or during the time in which we do not have ready-made responses and solutions of the problem, but we have to come together and live together for as long time as needed, and the problems become solved as a part of this joint or shared process of collaboration. And lastly, the focus in this meeting for doing that possible is on dialogical. It is on dialogism, generating dialogue between the people, instead of thinking that these meetings are primarily for finding solutions or making decisions. Of course, finding solutions and making decisions concerning the treatment are one part of it, but the main focus is not on, for instance, having some intervention in the symptoms or in the family interaction. So, first, saying some words of dialogue and dialogism on the whole. In my presentation and on the whole, in the way that I understand life and dialogue, dialogue is not mainly a form of communication. Dialogue is always, of course, communication, but actually that's only a minor part of what we are going to focus here upon. And actually that's one background of the idea that on our meetings we focus on primarily on generating dialogue, because in my mind dialogue is the basis of human life on the whole. I have here a reference from Russian philosopher Mikhail Bakhtin, who is one of the most important theologians to open the way, open the door to understand the role of dialogues and actually to understand the power of dialogue in the whole. Mikhail Bakhtin was first he was a psychologist, early 1920s, but soon after he did not work as a psychologist, but he became interested in literature and started his work with literature research. And while doing that, he was especially interested on Fyodor Dostoevsky's way of creating his novels. And in these novels, Bakhtin found a form of polyphonic novel in which the characters have only possibility to be in dialogue with each other, and the author no longer in his mind can have a control of his figure. This is a very basic idea on the dialogue on the whole, and open up for Bakhtin a way to go further in this idea. I will refer some of his thoughts today in this lecture and the next lecture to come. But what Bakhtin said, he said that authentic human life is the open-ended dialogue. Life by its very nature is dialogue. To live means to participate in dialogue, to ask questions, to hear, to respond, to agree, and so on. And then a sentence which I very much like. In this dialogue, a person participates wholly and throughout his whole life, with his eyes, lips, hands, soul, wherever it is, spirit, with his whole body and deeds. So actually what Bakhtin is saying, that from the very beginning and throughout our life we become a part of dialogue in our entire body and all the deeds and actions that we have. And in this sense, dialogue is not seen mainly as a way of communication, but it's a way of constructing ourselves in relation with the other people, and that leads us to focus also on the specific aspects of the dialogues of the meetings we have with the people in crisis. Why then focus in generating dialogue? But what is the specific idea of it? We have many ways of organizing the meetings with families and with the social networks. There are many social network interventions that introduce, for instance, idea how to construct the meeting. But in a traditional way, most of the ways that we have adopted, they are very much therapist-driven ways of taking care of the meetings. And many times they, of course, can lead to a very good outcome following the ideas that are put into practice. But what is a special aspect in a dialogical meeting is that it relies on their own psychological resources that the families and the social networks are having. The family and the patient are having. Those resources which are not available because of the crisis or because of perhaps some other things that already have preceded the crisis situation. And now when we come together and start to work with a shared process of collaboration, it means that there is a much more place for the family and for the patients in a secure way to invest their energy to become with their own resources involved in this setting and through this setting start to focus more on the life outside of the treatment system. And there are many approaches that focus on dialogical or language. There are these narrative therapies, solution-focused therapies, and some other language-based practices. But this is the difference in dialogical practices. The difference lies on the role of the therapist, which is different. The role of the therapist is no longer, as for instance in narrative practices, to think that the therapist's role is a focus of the unique outcomes or focus on externalizing the problems, or in solution focus work. The role of the therapist is very much look for kind of solution language instead of problem language. So they are, in these approaches, therapists are much more in focus than they are in a dialogical approach, in these dialogical practices.
Can I ask a question
Please.
there? So it sounds like I see two things that I don't know whether that can apply to other parts of the world. One, the patient and the family would have to trust the therapist to open up their soul to the therapist. So how to accomplish that trust?
Yeah.
And then the second question is, it sounds like it's going to take more time when you have to listen to the patient and their relative, their family, and try to find solutions. And there's a lot of dialogue involved. And so in some countries, one therapist might have to see 50 patients a day.
Yeah.
So how do you address that kind of challenge?
The first point that you made, that the possibility to open his or herself is a very, very basic idea. There are some writers who says, for instance, that one who is named David Butters, who says that in dialogue we become naked. We disclothe ourselves, and of course while doing that we wait that the other ones also disclothe themselves. So it's a very vulnerable situation, and of course the main idea, as you propose, is to make a safety enough forum here that the people really can start to take away those clothes that we have for us to protect ourselves from whatever we think that we have to protect. This is the basic idea on the whole, and exactly that is why we so heavily have to focus to take it seriously everyone's utterances from the very beginning, that people have a feeling that I have been taken seriously, my opinion is respected, even if it can be different one compared to some other that are participating in this meeting. But the second point, I'm not so sure if this takes longer time than some other forms of therapy. If we want to be effective, of course, if we in a mechanical way meet with 10 patients every day, we can ask if this really is productive or having good outcome. And in addition, in this open dialogue, especially in crisis, because we want to focus on team, at least 2 persons being there. In that respect, it seems to be a bit more time consuming, but perhaps the basic assumption what makes out is that the need for treatment, the period of treatment becomes shorter, and the process can be much more intensive. I've been many times involved in a situation in which psychotic crisis could be dissolved or taken care of in one meeting, and actually there were needed second or third meeting only to see that things are okay. And that would, in my mind, be not so much possible if there is only single therapist meeting, single clients, because the system is not there. But this is a question of practical organization, which the idea that I said in the opening was part of it.
So go back to the first question, the trust issue. Do you see differences in different cultures? Are people from one culture more easily trusting other people than another culture? I'm just curious. I feel like some culture people tend to open up more, and in some cultures it takes them a long time to relax and to trust.
Yeah.
Have you perceived any differences?
Yeah. Of course, I'm a bit lucky in my position because I can work in many different countries with many different kind of cultural background of the clients, and perhaps my a bit surprising notion has been that there seems not to be that big differences. When I meet with the family, as I met this year, for instance, a family in Colombia, Bogota, where mother and father with a son who have been using drugs, and they come together with a joint meeting, or when I meet with the family in London or Berlin or in Finland. In many ways the same aspects are there concerning how much we can contribute their openness. But this is not the whole truth, because I have, for instance, not a long time ago, I had a presentation in New York, and there were many of the consumers, survivors movements participants were there, and in New York, perhaps especially, they seem to have a lot of experience in that they have a conflict with the family, and they could not at all have the idea that meet with the family, because their experiences is that the family relations have been abrupted, and someone has been feeling that the family have thrown them out of the family, and it was not possible for them to think that to come together and start to be open with each other. So in this respects, what kind of basic experience I have with my family is absolutely very important aspect. But perhaps, I don't know if that's so much related with the national cultural differences that we have. For me, this generating dialogue is very, first it seems to be a quite simple idea. But then while working with different professionals, actually with professionals who also would have had quite long experience in this field, and I have got an interest that they would like to apply some of the idea. And as a surprise perhaps for all of us, it seems to be a rather challenging task to adapt the dialogical way of being in the meetings. Especially perhaps because we as therapists and a professional on the whole, we are used to think that we are the one who have the responsibility, we are the one who have to contribute with our methods, for instance, in the conversation, or even in some cases we have an idea that we are the one who have to contribute with the proposal for solutions of the ideas. And this idea that I'm going to present here is much different from that in some respects, and therefore I'm going to go into the details to trying to form a kind of picture how, in an optimum way, a dialogical meeting could be organized in the way that focus on mobilizing the resources of our clients. The first idea, the first kind of basic starting point of this, what kind of dialogical meeting can be optimal, is that we try to guarantee a joint shared history within the side of the professionals and on the side of the family members and the social network. And for making this possible, we think that everyone should participate from the outset in the meeting. And this includes two very important aspects. First, we wait for that the one who is the patient, for instance, within his most extreme psychotic experiences, psychotic patients many times can be quite agitated in the beginning. They can have very strong beliefs of the wrong thing that happens to them, and with a lot of anxiety or some other feelings. And we expect those people to be in the meetings from the outset. We do not think, for instance, that is taught in some school that is named psychoeducation school that can also focus on working with the families, but someone says that meeting with the family in a crisis, for instance in a psychotic crisis, is a kind of overstimulation, and a psychotic patient should be protected in the first contact from this overstimulation, and therefore the meetings are organized, one with the family and the other one with the patient, and with an idea that we wait for as long time as the patient become again a bit more coherent and then can participate in the solution. And our experience is the opposite. It's the best to meet together in the most anxious and most agitated situation, because what seems to happen in this open meeting, that in the meeting people really can start to become more coherent. And actually in my mind it's quite optimal idea that becoming coherent happens in relation with my nearest family, instead of that have taken place in separation from the family. Because if it happens in relation, that we all are together here, all the meanings that are generated in this very moment become meanings for all of us. For the mother, for the family, for the sister of mine, if I'm the one who has this psychotic idea, and for myself. But if it's only in a separation, family have their own talks and I have my own process, and there is a new task to be done that we construct as here shared reality. So this is in some places already the first challenging task, to really have the idea that meet together when we only have big questions without any answer. Quite surprisingly, in many meetings, in many first meeting with a very agitated psychotic patients, he could be brought in the meeting by the police with handcuffs, and in the end of the meeting he sits with us as any one of us. And actually it can be the situation, and in the end of the meeting he don't have the voices that were so disturbing in the beginning, or he don't have the feeling that he is followed through TV or whatever the content of the psychotic experience was. And in that respect, it may be that what happened is that every one of these people, the patient, the father, the mother, the sister, has been taken seriously, and all of them can now feel a bit more secure as they were in the beginning. The second part of everyone participates from the outset is the big question: do we make a plans for the meeting? And here is the idea: not to plan with the meeting with our professionals' idea. Not this is actually quite important idea in family therapy. In family therapy, we were used at the 80s and the 90s that professionals always before the meeting they may come together and, for instance, can make hypotheses, as is done in Milan Systemic Family Therapy School, hypotheses of the problem and make a plans how to go on, or in some other places as well. This is also the case many times in a bit more traditional psychiatric system, in which some people need that professionals need to come together to make clear what is the agenda of the meeting and what are the things that we have to take into account. But here again we think that it's best that we come into the meeting without pre-planning the ideas. The more we make plans for the meeting, the more we also construct a risk that we are occupied with our map of the problem that we created for the meeting, instead of being here and now with some actual points in which very important issues concerning this crisis can appear, and we are not waking enough to do it. And this is a second challenging task to think, not to make plan, but to come open in the meeting. And for us professionals, it means that we really are in need to be connected with these people, to understand the life from their point of view, and together with them, and based on those ideas that we generate together, we start to have ideas of our professional task, duties and obligations that we have to do. So this means that all things associated with analyzing, seeing the problem, what has happened, and planning the treatment based on our observation what has happened, and making decisions of the treatment plan and other issues are discussed openly and decided while everyone present. So this means that these meetings, open meetings, are, if I use the word, loaded with important issues, because now there isn't any other forum in which professional comes together, make the analysis of the problem, or make the decisions of planning of the treatment so far. But what professional has to learn is to how can I learn to speak in a way of my own observation in the presence of the client and the family, that can be contribution for the problem. We are so used to speak with the clients, and we are not so used to speak with each other openly. And now this second point means that neither after the meeting the professionals are thought to come together and make a conclusion what was this all about, but all conclusions should be done in the meeting. And what does it mean for the professionals? We should learn a way of speaking with each other that we can make the conclusions that we need of all issues in the presence of the language. This is the process of learning of the language. But of course there is a, let's say 80% of the change in our language happens by itself, compared that we sit in the meetings among professionals without our clients. The language is very attribute oriented. We use words and categories and describe the problems and pathological size of the problems. But when we come together with our clients to speak of those issues, that language is not possible. That can no longer live. We can no longer focus on mainly having these stable categories or only speaking of the pathological size, but the language is chasing automatically one part of it and the other part what we need to learn. The second question is to think that what is this all about? What's the aim of this meeting? This is a therapeutic, this is a professional meeting. And in this way of understanding what is the role of the joint meeting, we focus primarily on generating new kind of conversation. And it means that the main aim is not to focus on the family, on the pathological side of the patient. The main aim is not to remove the symptom in these meetings, or the main aim is not to have an intervention to changing the family. For family therapists, this is a bit challenging task to learn, because many people working with families have an idea that what we have to do, we should create intervention in which we aim at changing the family interaction if we see that not being as constructive as it could be. But in this meeting, that is not the aim. We are here, this is one way to have it, we are here for generating new language for the experiences that do not yet have words. Mm-hmm. And of course this is an idea to describe how do we understand mental health problems and we understand crisis on the level. Mm-hmm. Having some symptoms can be a way that our bodies actually produce symptoms in a situation, in a stressful situation in which we do not have access in our language to have a description of our experiences concerning this occasion. Many times people who have psychotic problems, for instance, in their hallucination, what happens, they start to speak of something that has happened in their life. And when we, in the first time, sit in the meeting and all of a sudden someone can say that I can have a control of nephrostosis. It's ununderstandable. How come you can have a control of nephrostosis? Mm-hmm. And we easily think that this is only non-meaningless saying that is his or her, in this occasion, his psychotic experience. But then when we meet another time and third time, and afterwards we'll start to realize that actually he was speaking of something that really has happened in his life in somewhere. Of course, through the psychotic experience, there is always many other things added to that idea. But the psychotic experience can be, the hallucination can be the first time that he can find words in some way to describe his experience. In some way to put words something of this that has happened in his life. In this specific case, what we then learned after a while, not in the beginning, it took a time to realize that he was much concretely connected with his neighbor than we ever could thought. In the building, concerning all the flats in the building, there have been a reconstruction of electronic system for half a year or 7-8 months before. And something had went wrong in this construction, because what has happened was that the telephone lines had been connected in the way that the telephone bills from the telephone of the neighbor actually came for him to pay. And this poor man, living alone, step by step tried to do many things to stop this, but nothing happened. And in the end, he was convinced that he is in a program that is planned for him, and in a response to be in a program by the neighbor, he could manage a ways in which he also would have a control of the neighbor. Of course, these were psychotic ideas. There were no program. All this has happened by chance, and of course he could not have a control of neighbor in any respect. So in this way, they were psychotic ideas, but something that has happened in his life, and this was a kind of metaphoric way to find words of those. And when we now come together, our task is to be involved generating new language words for those experiences and language. And my position as a therapist becomes a bit different compared to the more traditional way to understand how I used to think of my position of therapist. When I had in my training in systemic family therapy at the 80s, I was occupied of looking at the things that trying to find a way to make a change, finding a way to understand what is behind these words and having change in the family. But now I become a part of this kind of community in which we sit here, listen what he and the others are saying, and try to make space for more words. Concretely, what this means, for instance, in psychotic cases, I'm used to stop everything that happens in the conversation if someone speaks something that I think that this probably has some psychotic context. In this occasion, it happens something like, wait a moment, what did you say? Did you say that you have a control of neighbors? Yeah. Could you help me to understand a bit more? How does it happen? When did it work? And when did it start? And so on and so on. And my hypothesis many times are that actually at this point of time, something very important concerning the psychotic experience is dealt with, and therefore it's very fruitful to stop the other things that are going on and take use of this occasion and go so far as possible to having words of that experience, even if we are not aiming to have that away or aiming to find a reason what is behind, but to take it seriously. Of course, we can think that any kind of problem can follow the idea. When someone got a panic disorder, perhaps that's end of words. I do not have words for something dreadful that I react in this way, but it's another kind of response. Someone acts violently can be seen as a point in which I no longer have words to deal with this situation, so I have a violent act. I have an attack to my dearest wife or whoever is the object, target of this violence instead of that. And we come together and start to generate language what happened.
I have a question. I'm sorry if I'm asking too many questions.
No.
How long would it take a therapist to feel comfortable in this approach? I mean, if they were trained in the traditional approach and then they have to learn this new approach, they have to start to feel comfortable. Like your experience, how long would it take them?
Of course, it varies. For instance, if you are working in a system in which all the system supports you in trying to find this, so I would suppose that it takes shorter time for the therapist to to be familiar and to be encouraged to be open in the meeting in the way of encouraging. But both what is needed is training, and in training especially to make rehearsal of how is it to be there. But of course to be involved in the practice is as important. But I wouldn't. What could I say? I've seen that, for instance, in some 6 months or in 1 year, people really can see what is the difference that has. If you first have an idea of it. But if you are in a situation in which you define that I myself start to do that, and perhaps the surroundings does not so much support me, or I don't have possibilities to work together with some other colleagues that support me in this kind of situation. It definitely takes a longer time to learn all the aspects of the situation. But it cannot happen only by deciding that now I start to work in this way, because there are many confusing situations, and those confusing situations I usually react by again coming active and leading the families in their way of discussing with them. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. The third question here is to focus on how are these meetings organized. If we now follow the idea, we expect all to come together without any pre-planning, and we expect that in these meetings all the important issues are handled, and our work is based on the idea that we mainly focus on these meetings as a way of generating new language for experiences that not yet have it. So what kind of structure there will be for the meeting? There is a kind of misunderstanding that I've heard sometimes is that these meetings this openness meeting means that it's chaotic. There is no structure in the meeting. Of course, that's not possible. Every meeting between human beings, there is always generated some structure for the meeting. And in this open meeting, the structure is generated by the context. Of course, it can vary a bit in some respect. For instance, if we think that we need someone to conduct the meeting. Where I used to work, I have my background working in a team in Finnish Lapland in which this open dialogue idea was first initiated. And in that practice we all the time work as team, and they all the time work as team also nowadays. And it means that no decisions in advance are done of who is the one conducting and who of the teams are more silent. But what happens is that the therapist come into the room and start to discuss with an idea that every process generates its leaderships among the professionals in the way that is suitable for this specific crisis. For instance, in the very first research that I done in the late 80s of this, looking at what happens in the admission meetings when someone had a referral to the hospital, and I could follow my task as a researcher was to follow behind a screen, behind a video camera, the meeting, and there could be, for instance, 3 meetings actually with the same persons, one doctor, one nurse, one psychologist, and in three meetings the leaderships could vary. In the first meeting it would be the doctor who is most active, but in the next meeting with another family there could be the nurse who become most active, and the doctor is almost saying nothing, and third meeting nothing different. And in my mind this can in a natural way respond to this specific context, and most often the choice is as made it that so it's best for this specific situation. Why? When people have tried to apply this idea into their practice, and most of us are much more used to more structured way of working, they say that this is all too chaotic way. I cannot come into the meeting if I do not know who has the main responsibility, and I know my role. And that's of course very good point. There is no sense that we create to us a kind of all too confusing situation in which we are all the time uncertain what is my role, what is needed from us. And for that reason, it's not wrong at all to make a decision that one is conducting and the other one is supporting the one who is in charge of it. But however we organize the leadership of this specific, the hosting of this specific meeting, perhaps that could be a better word, not so much taking the lead, but to host the meeting. And whoever is the main facilitator, if it's the team or if it's the main one person, there are four important questions. First one, how do we open up the meeting? Second one, how do we guarantee all the voices have place to be heard? The third one, how do we build up a place for discussions among the professionals? And the fourth one, how to conclude the meeting with definitions of what have we done, or how do we conclude the meeting on the whole. First, a very general idea of this meeting is that we in this meeting we mainly follow the stories and the themes and the ideas of the families, and which means that it's advisable to have those issues that we know as professionals that we have to take care in the end of the meeting. And actually I'm quite strongly convinced that you never open up this meeting with your own subjects, own themes that you say need to be, but always have those as at the end of the meeting. Well, when I say never, that of course cannot be a kind of rule that is followed. Sometimes there is need to have a meeting in which we focus on the professionals' duties only, but mainly. First, to open up the meeting. Open up the meeting with open-ended questions that makes possible for the participant to start to speak of the things that are most actual for them at this very moment. Open-ended question can be, for instance, how are you? Who would be best to start? How would you like to use the time? Or something like that. All this opening makes possible that the people with whom we are sitting here start to discuss of the issues that are most actual for them. And if we did not do that, if we open up the meeting by words saying that we are here to handle this issue and make a decision of this issue, perhaps half of the ideas that the people who were invited in the meeting or are already excluded. Okay, someone thinks my things are not so important, which should not introduce more ideas to be open and listening to the others if they are not taking seriously. Here is the idea the opposite. Always have a starting point for the experiences that the people. In this open question, mostly the one who first start to speak of very relevant and important. It can be the mother in the family who start to speak of her concern, what has happened. But the second point also is as important, to guarantee that all the voices have place here. So if it happens that this is the mother who speaks here and she's speaking of important issue, but I could say, being there, is that when I listen to you, it sounds like these are very important issues, and I really hope that we can go on with these subjects. But before we go on, I would like very much to know what your other hearts have on your hearts. What are your concerns for your other who came in? And in that way, quite early in the meeting, we have place for everyone to have his or her comments. And what we expect is that everyone makes a kind of embodied handling, embodied action by producing some words. Someone can say, the father can say, I don't have any specific themes, I'm only here for listening. But that's a very okay way to participate in the meeting. When people come into the meeting, they are mostly very excited. It can be that this is the first time they ever participate in this. They do not know what is expected from them. But in any case, all are very excited. There are people who they don't perhaps not know at all and so on. And this tension can be a kind of hindrance to be open to listen what happens. And of course it can be a hindrance to be open to put my own experiences in words. And therefore this encouragement in the beginning to listen of the voices of all of them are so important part of it. Because when I say only that I don't have anything special that I want to speak, I can more relax. Because I realize that I can say something. And then even more if I'm verified, okay, good that you come, welcome. I can relax and then I can start more to listen to voices of the others and of myself.
I have an example here. Let's try if this is working. Yeah. When we speak of the idea that
every voice is become heard, we easily think that one voice for the mother, one voice for the father, one voice for the sister. But of course this is not the case, but because we all participate in many voices in the meeting. And we have to acknowledge all the persons as voices, but at the same time we very much welcome the different voices that everyone has in this actual situation. And this is an example in which these psychotic voices became a part of the story in one meeting. This is a story for Antti. A stands for Antti. And these are very first comments in a meeting when he came to meet with the team in a community mental health office. What has happened before this is only have a license to video record this meeting and those kind of issues. And then the very first question of the nurse, T1 refers to a nurse. There were two nurses and one doctor, chief psychiatrist who were involved in it. And here is the open question. Where should we start? And Antti says, Antti is about 21 years of age. I can't really remember anything of my life, of my whole life. Therapist says, has it been like this for a long time now that you can't remember anything? Perhaps you notice here that you can't remember anything is the same word that Antti has been used. This is very illustrative of the dialogical way of working on the whole, that many times when we as therapists respond, for instance, that is very usual for me, I take some part, exactly the same words that she or he said, and repeat it, and then I go on with asking something. That is a way for me to adapt the story of the one who is speaking. And as it happens, what's the nurse? Well, I don't know if it has been that way for 2 months. I do remember whether I've been in contact with someone, but then when I leave my place, I don't even know if I was there, and where I might suddenly pop up is here. The other therapist is the doctor. So with whom are you living? I've been living by myself, but now I've come to my parents. And for how long time have you been living by yourself? For 4 years, 3 years. And then therapist again asks, whose idea was it that you came here? Well, mother's. And the doctor asked, and what was mother worried about? Actually, we can see, I stop here a while. We can also see here what I just said of the team coming as a joint. What the therapist 1 and therapist 2 are doing, they made a joint questioning and joint commenting, but what they do, they adapt their comments to the other comment that the other one was doing. This is an example how the team can take charge of the meeting. Well, coming back to the story. And what was mother worried about? I don't know if I've ever been talking with her. I can't really remember anything. I have a feeling that I have even hit someone, but I can't even remember. Has someone said that to you? No, but I'm a paranoid and lost my memory. You think that something has happened. What is actually fascinating, only some 5 minutes has gone in the meeting, and we know quite a lot of the situation. Antti gives a description of his situation, what is quite informative. He said that I've been living my alone, I have had some problems, I've lost my memory, I don't know where I am, I perhaps have been hitting someone. And in the end he even said, but I'm a paranoid, I lost my memory, I have this strange feeling of life. He speaks of something that easily therapists start to think that perhaps he has some psychotic experience. But then happens a change in the meeting. Therapist asks, what about your father? Is he worried about some specific issue? I don't know. But yesterday night when we were watching TV, we went to bed and in the morning he left to work. And what was the situation when you returned home? Well, I was afraid of others. I was quarreling with these kinds of guys. I'm afraid of them, and you see, they had key made to my place, and then they came in and raped me and did all these things. May, asked the therapist. I was living in my apartment. You see, someone who came into my flat, had they been blackmailing or something, and forced to steal a key, and they made a copy of it and could come in whenever they wanted. I don't know if that happened when I was asleep, and they gave some pills and I got mixed up and started to, I don't know, or if you take some drugs without knowing it, and then when you get into the flat, they wait until you are asleep, and after that come in with their own keys. All of a sudden the story is changing very dramatically. And now in this story he's no longer describing that I'm paranoid and I have this feeling, but he is psychotic. And when we know the story afterwards, we can make a hypothesis. What made it happen was the question concerning the father. When the therapist asked, what about your father? At that point of time, Antti's story went into a psychotic story. And father really in this family is, or things related with father really are things in this family that do not yet have words. There was a big concern of family, within family of father. Father used quite a lot of alcohol. They had a very unhappy relation with their mother, but that would not publicly acknowledged. And actually, as a part of Antti's treatment that went on actually took quite a long time. Father tried to commit suicide. So there is a lot of tension-loaded issues without not being spoken openly that were related with father, and in the same time, and that Antti has come into problem with his own life. Actually, what he speaks about these people who came in and raped him, and have they made keys and have they blackmailed me and so on and so on. Actually, Antti had got involved with a gang, with a group of people, had made some criminal acts even and so on, and this was a part of his psychotic reaction. Even if it's psychotic, but it's something that is very much real. So this is only one illustration of that when we have an interest to listen all the voices of these participants, there is not only one voice, but there are different ways. Antti's voice in the beginning was very coherent description what has happened, easy to follow. All of a sudden happened something that made the story in a very different way. But as we saw in this situation, the therapists were acting very in a very acceptable, in a very what could the word, inviting way. They approved Antti's way and actually encouraged to speak more. They did not say that cannot, could have happened. Perhaps that is something that has to done with that has something to do with your problems and so. But they went on in that voice of Anders. So this one illustration of having place for all the voices of becoming. The third question in this meeting is to how could we build up a place for discussion among the professionals. And as we learned in the first slide that I showed is that these meetings is thought to be a place in which all discussions concerning the treatment and all discussions concerning planning of the acts of the professionals. So building a place for professional discussions, that includes that part. The part of discussing of the treatment, all the issues related with that, and the second part concerns something that we call reflective thoughts. I will come back a bit later about what is this reflective thoughts. But this is perhaps the only kind of specific methodological challenge in this open meeting, because it means some structuring of the place that professionals really have a place to discuss with each other. And therefore it's good to learn from the very beginning a manner that is repeated from meeting to meeting, that always have some words among professionals, and in that way professionals can admit that, can adopt the idea that, and admit that the idea that this is really a part of our place. The fourth and final question here is that how do we conclude the meeting? And now when we follow the idea, the last 10 minutes of the meeting, 10 minutes, perhaps we have spared to the issues that we know that professional has to handle, professional has to put in front, and then we can. What could be the words for if I would be in charge of the meeting? I could say something like, it seems to be the time to start to close our meeting. Perhaps we have made a deal about it already in the opening, or we know that this is out of the subject that seems to be relevant to discuss here. So this seems to be the time to start to conclude. But before we do that, I wonder if there is anything else you might add. And this is the way to have the last word to our clients. These meetings are opened by the words of our clients, and these meetings are closed by the words of our clients. And in this way they have the control if this really was enough, and we do not have the burden that we have to decide if this was the relevant or not. Of course, I suppose that the family members can do a reasoning. Well, this was good. Of course, we have a lot more things that we would like to discuss, but perhaps this was enough for the time being. Some words of the reflective talks, because that's an important aspect of the open meeting. And this is a phase of the meeting in which we in a way become transparent for the clients to realize what are our thoughts, what are our conclusions for the treatment, but also what are our thoughts concerning the intuitive ideas what we have related to the problems that and issues that we have. Professionals learn to discuss openly of their own observation while the family is present, which is quite challenging task in the meeting. And behind this idea is something like a Norwegian professor Tom Andersen used to call reflective processes. We want to have in these meetings a shift between talking and listening. A safe place to talk of my own issues, but at the same time a safe place to be in a position to listen. What are the ideas that my problems perhaps have caused in the minds of the professionals and others? And quite simple. First, family members talk with the therapists, with each other perhaps also, and the second phase, family members have a place to listen while therapists talk with each other. And how is this done? There can be done in some form. These reflective processes are put into practice that you have a specific team. One interviews and there is a team behind a screen or in another corner of the room listening, and then the team discuss with each other. But in this open dialogue meeting, the reflective conversation is taking place by changing position from interviewing and to having a dialogue. First, I'm a member of a team and I'm participating in having questions, encouraging client to speak of their situation. Then at some point of time I could have an interest that I would like to have some words with my colleague. I could ask them, would it be okay if we have some words with this? Okay. Then we turn to each other. And this is the shift for being in conversation with the clients and coming into a conversation with my colleagues. Some important points. In this conversation, we look at each other when we discuss. I do not take a look by other eye to my clients when I discuss here. I do not look at the mother of when I speak with my colleagues of the ideas that I have got while listening to the mother. If I did that, if I looked at the mother another eye, to for instance to see if I really can say something like this, if she approves. I do not leave for the mother a place of listening, because I invite her by my look to be a part of our conversation, even if she is not saying something. And this is so important. When we speak with each other, our clients have a possibility in their inner thoughts to think what they think of what we say. This is challenging task for professionals who are not used, because it so easily happens, and then when professionals start to make comments, we make it to our clients or we have make further questioning. And how do we learn to become in this way transparent and disclosing something of our perhaps quite personal ideas that we have got? Not to speak of ourselves, but speak as a person, not a professional. No. This is a sensitive situation in the meeting, and therefore the comments that I do with my colleagues are absolutely resource orientated and positive comments. This is not at all a place for any negative or critical comments of what we have. I put myself into words in a form, I could say, in a form of questioning. I wonder if this could have been. I wonder if the father would have been very hopeless while he did not find any other way than take hand of her daughter. This was a situation of a father who is alone taking care of his 15 years of age daughter, who had been for a long time outside home, and when she in the end came home, father was so desperate that he shook her, and that was one part while they came in the social care. We had this meeting. So that was my way to put words of how I think, but perhaps her situation. Then my colleague said, yes, but of course it's not allowed to hit anyone or take hand of everyone. Why? I wonder why there were no any other options to go. Wondering, questioning, and this leaves space for those who hear us or listen to us to take that as one option and not a definite truth how it's going. And this phase of discussion, this can take only some comments. I can say something, my colleagues say something, or it can take some minutes. It's advisable not to have too long time with this. But whatever is natural in this conversation, it's always ended by asking the clients. I wonder if you have something that you started to think while you discuss, so that they have control if we made some misinterpretation or did not understand something wrong, they can correct. No, that was not the case. How it was. Actually, only this week in Monday I was involved in, Sunday, sorry, I was involved in one meeting in which we had with my colleague this reflective comments, what happened here. And in my comments I I commented something like I got the feeling while listening to the family that they are quite mixed in their choices. Should they choose this or that or the third option? And then when we asked the family, the father said that and this was he was happy of our comment, but then he wanted to correct one point that you said that we are mixing now. No, we are not mixing, because we are quite confident that this is the way we have to follow. And that was very good information for me also. This discussion are done mainly for our own sake, so that I, as a professional, while I talk with my colleagues on our own language, we can have place to have more understanding to us. This is not aimed at as a kind of family therapeutic trick or family therapeutic intervention in the way that at last the family really learns how to think of their problem when we as professionals discuss about it. But this is genuinely my own interest to understand more. But of course what most often happens is that families are very happy to listen to this, and they are very interested of our points of view. And for instance, in this meeting that we had this week here, what happened that the parents in this story, there were mother and father and their son who had got quite several property in his life. They listened to us, tears in their eyes, so that it was very moving, and they were very actually relieved, and because they had been anxious about what our comments be on the problems they are with. So this is a very sensitive and important phase in the way if we still think that we are here for construction new language, and this is one way of it. When we discuss with other, we construct language to us, but at the same time it has a resemblance to the family's experience of this. The last slide in this is the thing that we perhaps have repeated many times, that here we follow the words, not the meanings. We follow the utterances, and we do not search for the meaning that are behind the words. We do not aim at having interpretation or giving some specific meaning or explanation what has happened. I have here, if I manage to have it open, one example what could it mean. This is a part of a discussion that happened with the family, not a couple. There was mother and father and their young children, and Erkki is the patient here. He was severely depressed and actually has tried to commit suicide, and he had many type of psychosomatic concerns that were part of the story, and I think that this is illustrated also in this sequence. The wife is talking here that Erkki became extremely lively and fresh simply. No illnesses, no vomiting, no diarrhea, not even any pain in the hand. You could see it in a way in his face, she said. And the therapist asked, in his face, in what part of his face? Around his eyes. I have many times looked at it afterwards as well. I could see that he was better. And how was that different compared to how it is now here? A lot more tired, and I see the situation. Are there others apart from you who see it in the face? No. Erkki comes and says, Irma sees it. Therapist asks, Irma, who is she? She is one of our family friends. And how would she say if she was present here? This is the therapist's question.
then it will go on to ask the daughter.
What about you, Sirpa? Sirpa is around some 10 or 11 years of age. Do you see that your father is tired? When you look at your father's face, do you see the difference in if he is tired or well? He's tired, is Sirpa. Tired. What about when he looks like well? How does your face? How does your father's face look like? Happy. And where do you notice that? The mouth or eyes? Eyes. So this was the discussion in which the therapist approved the family's way of describing the situation. Erkki's wife said that I see it in her face, and the discussion went on in what way you can see it in his face.
And even the small daughter of the family was on the same track.
I wonder if you have some
Do
comments.
you have a age limit when you involve, see if the parents or one of the parents is ill? Then when you want to bring the children in the room, do you have an age limit? No.
No, that's something that was a question in the beginning, and that's something that is asked many times, but I don't see any age limit. Someone says, for instance, not the children after, not the children smaller than 7 years or 8 years of age could be invited, with an idea that only on that stage you have enough language to handle those ideas. But I don't share that idea. Small children, there is many aspects related to small children. See many things in the family that are not spoken by the adults in the family. And of course, small children, even 3 years, 2 years of age, they can be burdened of the problems of their family. They usually have a very big concern of the mother, if mother is depressed or whatever, if their mother and father are quarreling with each other and so on. And now it is so important that the small children also see that there is help for my family going on. And for many reasons, having them included to speak of things that has happened of their experience, but also to having them ensure that now we are helping them, that both ways are very important. And small babies can participate in an active way.
Because in some family, I think the dust in